Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well on this Thursday morning. Let's get going with Thursday, September 12th, 2024 work session. First order of business we have is a Duke Energy update. So I would like to invite Melissa Satius and her team from Duke Energy. Come to the podium. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. Today, it's lovely to see so many of the leaders for Pinellas County here. I've had the opportunity, and my team had the opportunity to know for many years. So thank you again. Spending time with you, we're going to share information about our vegetation management program. But really, this is about hearing from all of you because the feedback you give us is invaluable. And I want to thank the county staff for spending the time with us to talk through some very specific components of our vegetation management program. You know, the trimming and the pruning is kind of one part of the overall program. Communication is the other very, very critical piece. Communication with our customers, communication with our municipalities. So we're going to spend some time working through that and just sharing some of that information. I was just saying to Assistant County Administrator Silverboard that we, Duke Energy, the county, we have so much more in common than what separates us because both entities provide an essential service to our citizens and our customers. And Pinellas County is home to the Duke Energy service area and headquarters and has been for, from the beginning, 125 years since we started as a small little site in St. Petersburg. So before I start, I do want to take the opportunity, though, to just very quickly introduce the team members and the team leaders that are here with me today. So part of this is because they are the subject matter experts, they're responsible, but it's very important to all of us that you see our commitment. It runs very deep within our organization, and it starts with these leaders who have teams responsible for executing everything around reliability, safety, transitioning to a cleaner energy future, communication. So very quickly, Jason Williams in the yellow shirt is our Senior Vice President of Power Grid Operations. He's literally responsible for every pole, wire, fuse, insulator, and other things here in our service area in the 35 counties that we serve. Antonio Price is our Vice President for Power Grid Operations. He is responsible on his team for Pinellas County. He has joined us recently from another part of the enterprise, and he's probably asking Jason, why does Melissa call me so much? So I'm appreciative always when he answers the phone. Anthony Cootie, I think, is no stranger to the staff. He is our Director of Vegetation Management and works very, very closely with all of our municipalities. And then we have Katie Christian, who is our Director of Government and Community Relations. And I saved the best for last, Jeff Baker, who all of you know very well, who I think is an excellent liaison to all of you. And I know that you all depend on him for a lot of communication as well. So thank you. So with that, I'm going to go through the presentation myself, and then our leaders are here for any specific questions that you may have. I'm not going to go through bullet points. You all have had the packet. I'm just going to hit a few highlights along the way. I think all of you know Duke Energy, but just a snapshot of kind of the service area that we have, 35 counties, some numbers around kind of the miles of overhead line. And the interesting thing, and I'll talk about this a little further in the slide deck, we talk about overhead lines here, the number of underground lines we have, but half of Pinellas County on our distribution side is actually underground. And so, and we have a program that continues to target that overhead to underground conversion based on data. And then also we work with our municipalities who decide that they would like to underground for aesthetic reasons as well. And of course, just a few numbers around what we have as generation sites and kind of our peak on our ability and capacity around megawatts. So I wanted to share that with you as well. And then so kind of getting into the heart of the matter here, much like you, and as you provide water service, stormwater, infrastructure, maintenance, all of those kinds of things. Infrastructure is literally the backbone of our system. And so we track everything, much like you all probably do as well, a lot of data that we use to determine where we need to focus maintenance, capital investments, those kinds of things. So I wanted to give you a snapshot on the top 2 causes of distribution outages. These are based on 2023 numbers. Weather, not surprising, Mother Nature can be quite cruel sometimes, as we've seen just this summer. So 125 million minutes of customer outages in 2023 caused by bad weather. And that excludes major events like named storms as well. Vegetation, which is what we're going to talk about a lot today, in 2023 caused about 70 million, nearly 71 million minutes of customer interruptions in 2023. And, our mission and our commitment and our obligation to you and to your citizens who are our customers is that we are continuously providing reliable, resilient service, increasingly clean, and trying to do so at a reasonable rate. And so I am pleased to share that twice this year we have already reduced our rates. And then just a few weeks ago, we filed for our 2025 rates. And I'm pleased to say that those rates will go down again. So we are nearly $27 less per 1,000 kWh. We will be by January 1st, 2025, compared to that same time the previous year. So you may also be aware, though, that we just had a rate case settlement, and there was an increase of about 2% to our base rate. But even with that increase, we were able to reduce the overall price to our customers. So a little more on reliability. The next 2 slides, what I really wanted to focus on is kind of a more comprehensive view for you all on what we are doing to increase reliability. This is a lot of investment in the system. And so you'll see in the first bullet, between 2018 and 2023, because of those investments, along with things like methods around vegetation management, we have been able to decrease the average length of our customer outage by about 27%. And so some of the technology that I'm talking about that we have utilized and installed on the system has helped us immediately. We saw this with Hurricanes Ian, Nicole, Idalia, Debbie as well. But about 75% of our customers in Florida and 75% in Pinellas County benefit from this self-healing technology. And basically what it's like is your traffic app in some ways. It's equipment in the field on poles and wires and other types of pad-mounted equipment. But it detects, like a traffic app, if there's a problem, it's able to reroute to other facilities that will allow a customer to remain on. Now, the reality is we will always have to probably roll out trucks if there's an incident with like a car hitting a pole, if there are major repairs, but oftentimes things that cause outages are interference from a tree limb making contact, from, unfortunately, an animal making contact, those kinds of things. But that self-healing technology has been incredibly and instantly beneficial to our customers. And a statistic that I did want to share with you that with Hurricanes Idalia, Ian, and Debbie, that approximately 30% of the outages that occurred in those events were caused by vegetation management, which again, it is part of our overall portfolio of work that we have to do and to ensure that reliable service to our customers. So let's talk about vegetation management. Vegetation management, there is a way for trees and overhead lines to coexist, but it really has to do with height of the tree, species, also has to do with a lot of education for customers, and we're going to talk a little bit about a program we call Right Tree, Right Place. But as I mentioned, we have protocols that we utilize to determine what our tree trimming, pruning, removal methodologies will be. The protocols give us guidelines. So here is just a few bullets that highlight we go into vegetation management with highly skilled subject matter experts who are certified arborists, like Anthony Cootie, and we adhere to international guidelines and national guidelines around vegetation management. So we are very, very selective about that process. These are also the groups that are responsible for ensuring that our contractors like Lewis Tree and others are adhering to the expectations that we have around customers and communication. And on the communication front, which I'm going to talk to in detail, we know that we have the opportunity to do better. We know that, we acknowledge it, we embrace it, which all the more reason that input from Barry Burton's team, from Kelly, you all will make us better as we continue to responsibly trim trees in Pinellas County, but also in other parts of our service area as well. So on vegetation management, we're going to kind of talk on the next few slides kind of in two categories. We have protocols for distribution trimming, which are the lines that are basically from a substation to homes, neighborhoods. These are typically on kind of shorter, I'll say shorter poles, 35 to 45-foot poles. And then we're also going to talk about transmission. And that's really, I think, has been the crux of some of the concerns that we've heard from customers, that you all have heard from customers, has been our methodologies around trimming on transmission lines. Transmission lines are those that come from a generating plant to a substation. These are high voltage, anywhere from 69 kV all the way up to 500 kV. There are different federal regulations depending on the energy that is flowing through those lines. And that is one of the reasons why there's a difference in how we trim between distribution and transmission. And on vegetation management, so on the distribution side, we trim pretty much within a cycle of time. It's usually anywhere between 3 to 5 years. Backbone feeders that we, as we reference them, are typically those lines that you see on kind of major thoroughfares. Those we trim more frequently, usually around 3 years. But we receive proactive outreach from customers who might report something, or as our teams are working in the field. So, there's flexibility in there. Laterals or branch lines are those that are kind of going into neighborhoods, and those tend to be closer to a 5-year cycle. So transmission, we determine where we need to trim and where we need to remove. And on transmission, our preferred method is to remove the tree if it's over 15 feet tall. because of the number of customers that transmission lines serve. So I'll give you a reference. A feeder might serve anywhere between, we'll say, 2,500 to maybe 4,000 customers. Transmission serves tens of thousands of customers. And so in a place like Pinellas County that's so densely populated, we have customers that have proximity to transmission lines that also serve hospitals, wastewater treatment plants, other types of critical care facilities. But we take all that evidence-based threat, the conditions, we take system data on outages, and utilize all of that information to identify where we need to trim and what we need to do. And as again, it typically is removal on the transmission side. And so the part that I talked about earlier, right, we can answer all kinds of the questions about how we trim, why we trim. Oftentimes customers feel like we are taking too much of the tree. They can be very frustrated, disappointed, and quite saddened to see a tree that gets trimmed. And Anthony certainly can speak to how that trimming is based on trying to protect the health of the tree. On the transmission side, again, kind of the removal piece is, the removal is the preferred protocol. But communication is such a significant part of what we have to do, whether it's vegetation management, whether it's installing storm protection poles, new wire. I always say to the team, Jason says the same, customers don't want to wake up on a Tuesday morning and see a fleet of trucks in their neighborhood and have no idea what is happening. So on the distribution side, I'm just going to kind of walk through high level some of the outreach that we perform. And you all understand this too, being proactive in communication is kind of one part of it. We have to have somebody on the other end who receives it. And sometimes we miss customers, I will say that. And then sometimes customers get it. I mean, how many people get door hangers and they just kind of ignore them? A lot of people don't even go through their doors. They go through garages instead. So we have kind of a multi-step way of trying to reach our customers. On the distribution side, we use things like text messages. We also give customers the option, what is their preferred method of communication? Oftentimes it's a text message, sometimes it's email. But we do, before a project, go door to door to leave a door hanger. Sometimes we utilize postcard methodologies as well. And then also an interactive map that we have online that just shows a very kind of broad place where we'll be trimming. On the transmission side, because of our intent and our practice to remove trees, we take it even further. So on transmission, it starts with, we feel like this is so critical that a face-to-face interaction is the appropriate way. That is what we're striving for, is to meet with customers in person. So we will go to a house, knock on a door. If there's nobody there, we'll leave a door hanger. We will attempt that 3 times, asking the customer to call us back so that we can have that discussion. If there is no response to the door hanger, we will send a certified letter to the property owner, to the customer, asking them to contact us, and we give them a time frame in which we plan to trim, and hopefully that allows us to have the opportunity. What you see on the screen are just pieces of collateral that we use to communicate with our customers. So I mentioned earlier, this is Vegetation management it's an ongoing investment in communicating with our customers and with providing reliable service. So part of what we layer on to kind of the work that we're doing, the maintenance work that we're doing, is an ongoing year-round public education program. We call it Right Tree, Right Place. And again, some pieces of the collateral that we utilize. We also use targeted social media, like on Facebook and other sources to communication channels to put out media kind of assets, if you will, that have a link to, learn more by going to our website. I think this is really an opportunity for us to be able to provide information like this to our county partners and our municipal partners that they can share with citizens who may come to them. But we take it very seriously that we have a responsibility to share this information with our customers, because the oak sapling that you plant, with one of your kids when they're young, and you watch that grow along with your kids, and then the power company tells you that it's a danger tree. It's a very personal conversation with customers on that front, and we definitely recognize that. So Right Tree, Right Place, I think will continue to be an important part of our portfolio, and hopefully something we can continue to work with you all on. And so this next slide really is, I'm going to circle back to what I said in the beginning. We know that we have the opportunity to do better. We always do. That will continue to be a part of our just continuous business improvement. And we welcome it. I always tell the team, we have to be our own worst critics, or somebody's going to do it for us. So we try to always walk in the shoes of our customers, and sometimes we fall short. We own that. We recognize it. And so, again, that's why it was so important to get feedback from the county staff to help us, identify where we missed, what we're missing from their perspective. And we were grateful for the opportunity. Barry and his team had provided the names of some of the customers who had reached out to the county. We were able to look at every single one of those. There was, I think, maybe 8 to 10 of them for Pinellas County. And the majority of them were not actually the customers who were impacted. It wasn't their property, but they saw the trimming occurring. So this is an interesting element of kind of what we're taking into consideration to kind of cast a wider net, if you will, on communication. Because it's the customers whose yard that we might be in or behind. It is the municipality, but the broader community. How do we share information about vegetation management that we might be in the broader neighborhood? So that first bullet up there, that first statement, is we are evaluating all of our communication around vegetation management. We're going to revisit it. We're going to refresh it if necessary. We may come back to county staff and test a few ideas with you to get your thoughts on it. But I know Jason and his team are committed to this. I'm committed to this. We are going to reevaluate everything, and we've already started that process. So opportunities, definitely around vegetation management, communication. You have my commitment, you have Jason's commitment, that is what we are doing. As a reminder, our distribution vegetation management, the trimming and pruning, has not stopped. When the county began receiving some complaints, we agreed to halt and pause the transmission work, because that's the removal work, and that is the more concerning for our customers. But distribution work has continued. And I will share this morning, I looked through, I didn't read each single one, but about 12,000 customer comments that we have received through year to date. And we do this through our Net Promoter Score process. We survey our customers after nearly every transition, whether they ask for a bill payment extension, tree trimming, street light outage, all of those things. And it's really refreshing that people will take the time to give feedback. On the positive side, a lot of we think Duke needs to trim more. We appreciate the communication was good. They cleaned up the yard. Those were very helpful to us. Probably more instructive are those customer feedback, which is kind of the opposite of what we see in the positive comments. I didn't get notification. My tree looks terrible. What's left of it? They left debris. So we are taking all of that information and using that, again, to kind of feed into how we reevaluate on the customer communication side. So distribution has continued. It will continue. Literally, this week is the height of hurricane season, so we need to continue to remove those trees. And and I know that you all understand this as well. We have customers absolutely who don't want us to trim, and then we have customers who are continuously have been calling Anthony, his team, the company, since we paused transmission to say, why aren't you out here removing this tree? You said you were going to remove the tree. But because we had committed to you all that we would pause the program until we got more insight and feedback from you, but we're here today to share that it is essential for us to resume the transmission vegetation management work. But we've made some changes to how we will proceed in that space, and that's the larger bullet at the end. We'll continue to go through all those steps that I mentioned, starting with, knock on the door hangers, certified letters if necessary. Most of the removals that we end up doing are in easements, but we recognize, even though we have the rights to those easements, it's essential that we communicate with the customers. So we'll continue to do so. We'll continue to communicate with our customers. If the customer, the property owner, supports removing the tree, we will remove the tree. Now, that might not go over well with some of the neighbors down the street as they see this, but if the property owner agrees to it, we will do so. If the property owner objects to the removal, then we'll look at alternative mitigation, which will be trimming, pruning. Again, because these lines carry a high voltage, the trimming will ensure that it is clear enough that if there's bad weather event from the movement of a tree because of wind, wires move as well in wind conditions as well. So we'll ensure that the pruning is done to keep a very safe distance. That will be for this period, but we'll continue to monitor those trees and the growth. Things grow quickly here in Florida. The intent will always be to ultimately remove the tree, but if the customer says no, just trim it, we will do so, and then we'll continue to monitor it. And with the intent of removing it sometime down the road if it's re-identified as a threat. And this kind of change to our process is one we'll continue to always reevaluate, communicate with our municipalities. We're hopeful that as we improve our communication outreach, the customers will have a greater understanding. We recognize it's an ongoing process, and we have no qualms about moving and being agile in order to kind of meet the customers where they are. But it has to be in a way that it doesn't compromise our responsibility of providing reliable service to our customers. One of the comments I read this morning stated that, I know tree trimming is unpopular, but outages are more unpopular. And so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to thank you again for your time, and truly, I do want to express how grateful we are to Barry, to Kelly, to everybody on the county staff who has been very clear and transparent, didn't pull any punches, which we don't want them to do, on kind of what we need to do better. So I'll stop there, see if you have any questions. I'll ask the team to come up and provide more detailed answers, or certainly they can correct anything that I perhaps got wrong. So any questions?
Thank you very much, Melissa. That was a
You're
very
welcome.
thorough presentation. I'm sure we have some questions. Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, good morning again.
morning.
And first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for pausing when you did. I mean, it was just, there was something that was going on different that was attracting a lot of attention that I've never heard before. So it was just it was a difference. So I really appreciate the pause and some of the changes in your approach that you've mentioned. I think that's important. So I just had a few comments. One, keep doing the work you're doing in terms of working on our grid and making it as reliable as possible. I think outages do cause a lot of problems, headaches, issues, large issues, small issues, family issues.
They all matter.
Yeah, so all over the place. That's extremely important. You mentioned over and over and over about communication, improvement in that. I think that's obviously critical. Some of the pieces that you've done, that's the third point about education and all of that. So one of the things that you talked a little bit about was, like giving them an option on a tree. Like if they don't want to trim it instead of cutting it down. I was thinking before you made that comment that trees don't grow overnight. I mean, they grow all the time, but these are long-term creatures.
Yes, they are.
And so to give the idea of the right tree, right place for planting is important. I always caution people when they're planting trees. Number one, make sure you put it in the right place, but you don't own it anymore. It's like we now, like the county has their own little things about trees and what we can as residents do and can't do. So it's not just Duke Energy with we have some of those things. And I'm glad to hear of your environmental approach to trees and all of that. But I do think it's more of a midterm, long-term approach. You need to start identifying trees ahead of time for the next year. You're going to be coming through in 3 to 5 years again. Start identifying some of those trees that are getting close, so that residents have the choice to take care of it themselves before you come back and say that you're going to remove a tree. That to me is one of the things that more and more people that I've talked to would like to have that option available to them. The ones that are in the easement areas that you clearly come in and take out, if they had been told 3 or 4 years ago, you're getting close, we really are probably going to target that tree for taking out unless you can bring it down. Hiring these companies to come in and do the work it takes a while. When you come and leave a leaflet on their doorstep, it's like, well, we can't even get somebody to come out for 3 or 4 months, certain times of the year. So being able to program that for them, and again, I know it's an organizational issue trying to get all of that information in, but well, I tell you what, that would make a big difference for folks to be able to have some control over things that matter to them. And so just my comment on that front. But
And Commissioner, you bring up several good points. So because trees, they do grow quickly in Florida, but they don't grow necessarily overnight in a way that we have to, be back kind of every few months kind of thing. Although bamboo, my understanding, and Anthony can speak to this, there are some very fast-growing species out there. So when we started to get some of the feedback through the county, there's this real sense that like we changed our policy. And I think part of what contributed to that is the fact that it's been, in some of the areas that we're now back in, it was 2020 when we were going through the same area. 4 years goes by and, you know, people forget, right, that we had been there 4 years ago or, 3 years ago. So it is, so it can feel like there's this much more aggressive approach. So in some ways, that is what we can help incorporate into our communication, kind of the cycle, if you will. But because we have to use outage data and all kinds of other things, on transmission, it's not always a very clear kind of 3 to 5 years. But I think you're absolutely right. We have the opportunity to better communicate. What I will say is that especially, well, on distribution or transmission, we can't have customers attempting to trim trees around those power lines. Now, customers do have the responsibility of trimming their service lines, and we work with them to to de-energize the line, to ensure that the private tree company is going to be safe and not make any contact. But anything that's pole to pole is our responsibility, and that is done in coordination with the contractor, with people on Jason's team. Overall, our safety is number one. Safety for our employees, safety for our customers. So, but again, an excellent point you make. As we trim trees every single day, there's lots of private tree companies here in the state of Florida. And so continuing to communicate with them, educate them, I think is an area we have an opportunity to do better so that we can show kind of that partnership there.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Justice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for being here. We appreciate the communication. Besides the quite frankly, that we had the batch in Clearwater that we heard a lot about earlier this year. In St. Petersburg, where I am, I have not heard those same level of issues that we have with Clearwater that we're still. But the only complaint that I ever heard was on the trimming of, the shaping of it, as opposed to cutting a straight line down to, that kind of thing. That's really the only thing. Is that you're talking about in your new communication that you're going to go in the trimming and you're going to have these experts? Is that part of the discussion as far as the trimming of the shaping of the tree? So
I think that in the collateral that we use, whether it's social media assets, whether it's door hangers, whether it's the right tree, right place, I think we have the opportunity to reevaluate if we can have better language in there that talks about why that big V is in the middle of the tree. But I probably would ask Anthony Cootie to come up since he is an expert. I can see he's feverishly taking notes here, but I'd like to ask Anthony to come up to talk about maybe, Anthony, some of the specifics about, the methodologies that we use on the actual pruning and cutting style. I don't know if I would call it a style, but I guess method, so.
Thanks, Melissa. So yes, to your point, I think with Melissa talking about the communication piece, right, the why we do what we do. From a utility perspective, we, and I read a lot of the same comments Melissa did from our NPS scores and customer feedback. A lot of it's around aesthetics. From a utility standpoint, we are trimming for reliability, making sure that trees, power lines are there. We don't have interference causing outages. So a lot of times we don't get the aesthetics that the communities, the residents, and our customers are looking for. I think back to Melissa's point, it goes back into communication, right? Making sure people understand why we're doing what we're doing, why trees look the way they do. From our standpoint, it's about reliability, not necessarily the aesthetics. We try our best when we leave a tree to make it look as best we can. We do have ANSI standards that we follow like everybody else in our industry. But unfortunately for us, the end result isn't necessarily considering the aesthetics of the tree at the end, but considering how do we have this tree and this power line in a state that is reliable as possible until the next time we can come back. And that's where I think, to Melissa's point, where we do our communication, our education with our customers, citizens of the municipalities will go a long way for us. But the other part of that, every tree is different, depending on the species of the tree, the location of the tree, whether it's directly under the line, how far offset of the line, has a lot to do with how much we have to trim, and even the structure of the tree. You take two trees of the same species, they can have very different structures of how they grow. So all these play into the decisions that come into how those trees will look at the end of the trimming process. And that's where my staff, certified arborists, are out there working with our contractors to ensure we get the best results at the end. And again, I think going back to communicating with our customers, we recognize, like Melissa said, we can do a much better job, and that's our intent.
Yeah, I think that's going to continue to, at least that's, besides the issue we had in Clear, that is the number one thing that we hear from the constituents. Beyond that, I do want to echo your comments about Jeff. He does a great job of being in touch with us before things happen, when things happen, and after. So all that is really, really important. And then since you're here, I really want to say thank you to all your linesmen and staff that get out there to prep before the storm, and then are ready to react after the storm, and then those that travel to support the other communities. Just really appreciate all the work they do for us.
Thank you, Commissioner Justice, for those comments. We very much appreciate it. As we often say, responding to a major storm is like staging an army. And certainly I would expect with the hurricane that has just made impact in Louisiana, that Jason has probably been on calls about mutual assistance, meaning that Duke Energy would send crews there to help with restoration, because they're the same states that we reach out to when we need them to come support us as well.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner?
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate some of your comments, and I'm glad you corrected. I wasn't advocating that Chris climb a tree and.
We definitely do not want Commissioner Latvala to trim a tree. I think he would call.
I kind of like to see that, actually.
But yes.
But to your point, are you saying that even private contractors in easement areas shouldn't be trimming the trees where the power line is going through? So those are all reserved for you guys.
Correct.
So there's a heightened responsibility for you. You know, we move into homes, and what we're experiencing in some cases now is we have golf courses in our backyard that all of a sudden get threatened to be taken away, and we get upset about it.
I live in Bardmore.
Yeah, so
Yes.
So the same with trees. You know, we move into an area, we love the home and the trees that are there, and we all of a sudden realize that they're not done right, and it's almost like a bait and switch that you feel, and when you don't have that control and you lose it, it's offensive. So I really appreciate those tweaks that you're bringing to the table, helping folks understand where we are, right tree, right place going forward, but at the same time giving them some flexibility on trimming versus taking it down, knowing that it's still a target to come down, but it's that kind of.
And truly, I mean, a power line doesn't have to be sparking to kill someone. And so we really take that public safety very seriously and want to ensure that people are not attempting to trim near our lines.
But I would echo Commissioner Justice's comments about what you all do in staging after a storm, not only in the area, but wherever it's needed.
We very much appreciate that, and I'm sure Jason will be sure to pass that along to our teams.
Okay, thank you very much, Melissa. This has
Thank
been a really, really informative and helpful discussion. I think, if anything, this has just sort of underscored how much of a complex issue this is. It isn't just a matter of looking,
Yes, sir.
oh, there's a branch up there, take it down. There's a lot of variables, a lot of moving pieces that go into what you have to do here. So that'll help us in communicating with our constituents when we get feedback from them. You know, and just thinking, you mentioned that it was in 2020 when you were here last time trimming trees and didn't really get any feedback like this. And it just occurred to me that that was right in the middle of COVID.
Exactly.
And people probably just either didn't notice it, had other things on their mind, other priorities, and things have changed a lot since then. So, and to your point that outages are a lot less popular than tree trimming is, I mean, that's something that I think we all have to keep into perspective as well. So, and you may already do this, but I was just thinking as you were talking about different communication strategies, I don't know if you use social media or like the Nextdoor app to try to push out, you know, what you're doing in areas, but just something you may want to consider if you're not already doing it.
We do use a lot Facebook, and the Nextdoor app is interesting, very interesting, because we have, because it's neighborhoods, we would have to join kind of every neighborhood, and we've done a lot of investigation that we probably wouldn't even be allowed to, we wouldn't be invited to. But I do watch my Nextdoor app, and of course, whenever I see anything about Duke Energy, my team they just like, Melissa, promise me you're not going to, respond or say anything, because I want to use the opportunity, right? But yeah, Nextdoor app is, it's become a really a highly utilized resource for customers. But yeah, so Facebook, Twitter, or X, whatever it's called these days. I don't think we do as much on Instagram, but, also, press releases, media. But again, we would welcome the opportunity to provide information that the counties or other municipalities can put on their website. Like the, Right Tree, Right Place. We do a lot of tree giveaways throughout the year. We could partner with Pinellas County on those opportunities as well. I mean, I can remember I was in Jeff's role and giving out trees at Heritage Village, and people would come and get a tree, and then they'd come back the wife would come and get the tree. Like, they sent the whole family up to get a tree. So we try to, use a diverse set of ways to reach our customers. But I know we've taken a lot of time. You have Jeff. You couldn't ask for a better liaison. But certainly any one of us that are here today should also be considered, feel free to reach out to us. I was very appreciative when Barry reached out to me directly back in the spring. And so, which has given us the opportunity here today. So thank you. Have a safe rest of the week. And we look forward to cooler weather.
We do. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate your partnership. All right.
Speaking of power.
Speaking of power. All right.
So Paul's coming up. He's going to talk about waste energy and solid waste and all kinds of different things.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Commissioners. Paul Sacco, the Director of Solid Waste. So I have 4 topics just want to run by that are solid waste related. We're going to talk a little bit about recycled materials processing, Chapter 6 of our ordinance, which is specific to solid waste, waste energy power brokering, and also the waste energy operator procurement. Some of this is a repeat from last year when we provided an update, and then some from the budget information sessions. So with recycled materials processing, I want to give you just a few recycling facts, talk about the current state of recycling, looking at the county-owned material recovery facilities, MRFs as we call them, versus a countywide processing contract, and then a staff recommendation around that. So we've been tasked, solid waste has been tasked through your technical management committee to look at material recycling processing dating back to, actually, we went back, looked at chronology, going back to November of 2019. So we've been on board looking at this, talking with our processors. We've developed a pro forma on what it would look like to construct and/or operate a county-owned MRF versus one that was going to be possibly constructed in Hillsborough County. We've looked at the cost of doing both. We've also looked at the tonnage costs associated with transportation, operating transfer stations, and all that. I'll discuss that in a few seconds. We looked at the average market values of recycled materials, and also the landfill life if we were no longer going to recycle, and not just residential recycle, but to look at all recycling programs. If they were to be abandoned in Pinellas County, we would actually reduce your landfill life by 55 years, or up from 80 years to 55 years. So you're looking at almost a generational loss if we weren't going to do recycling in total. The actual residential piece of that is about 65,000 tons a year. And a third of that's in the unincorporated area, a third in St. Petersburg, and a third in the remaining cities and county, or cities and municipalities within the county. So your average recycling cost is about $150 a ton. When you look at the tipping fee at Pinellas County, solid waste, you know, that number's around $50. So the cities are like, well, why can't we just send you all our recyclables because that's cheaper, and, you know, you're turning it into electricity anyway. And the reality around that is we can't accept it because we don't have the capacity at the waste energy to take on that much more material. 65,000 tons equates to just a little bit less than a month of tonnage that we would see on a given year. And if we're at capacity, that means even if we were dedicated to burning those recyclables and generating electricity, 65,000 other tons are going to be pushed to the landfill. And if we were to do that here and for other areas, again, if we got into that merry-go-round of reducing and sending that stuff to us as opposed to going to a processor, that's when you start impacting your landfill life, which is what, you know, we've agreed to through our master plan and the vision for solid waste not to do, is that to extend that and actually be zero waste to landfill by 2050. So your average market values for materials is about $60 a ton. So you do the math, it's $150 to process, and you're getting back $60 a ton. I mean, the days of getting, you know, a profit from recycling, that hasn't happened in 20 years. You know, since China stopped accepting your recycled materials, you know, on an international level, you know, those costs have been reduced, you know, almost 70%. And then just in the last year, they've been reduced by 3 or 4%. So it's cyclical. I mean, they will go up and go down, and I would believe from a forecasting standpoint, we're probably at a neutral, you know, area right now, given the price of oil and some of the other commodities that are out there. But they will increase and decrease, but they will never go back to a place where it's going to be profitable to do recycling. We need to do that because it's environmentally conscious, it's the right thing to do. We can't process all that waste, you know, and it's one of the areas on the public side where they feel like they can make a difference. And if we can do that in a single stream and make it easy for the public to do that, then that's probably where I would say the industry is going to continue to remain. So single state, our current state of single-family residential recycling municipalities, all the municipalities have curbside recycling, and it's mandatory. Your residents in those areas are paying for that. Some also offer drop-off sites where they may not be taking materials specifically in the containers put at curbside, but they do offer options if you want to take bottles or whatnot, maybe to a drop-off location. In the unincorporated area, recycling is voluntary. Those areas are being served by your private haulers and drop-off sites. So the residents have the option of working with their private hauler to you know, enter into an additional fee for the recycled collection curbside, or they can take their materials to a drop-off site. We did a statistically valid survey in the spring of this year, and what we found was actually great news, I thought. 70% of your unincorporated area residents, single-family residents, have said that they already recycle. They either do that through curbside, paying a fee with their private hauler, or they're taking those to the drop-off site. We did an intercept survey prior to that, and that number was around 68%. It wasn't statistically valid, but when we got the statistically valid survey, we kind of had confirmation that both were in and around that number. So we're pretty satisfied that that's a high number for a voluntary, recycling in those areas. All recycled materials that are collected go to one of 5 regional MRFs in the 7-county area. So again, when we were asked to look at this back in 2019, but really we got into the crux in 2020, this is the second pro forma that was updated late last year on whether Pinellas was to operate a MRF or we were going to send that material to Hillsborough. And you can see the differences in numbers for capital and operation for both. What isn't on that sheet is that if we were to send materials to Hillsborough County, you would still need to pay for transportation. You still would have the operating cost of your transfer station. And then you would also have that delta, that 128 to 105 dollars per ton delta. When you look at that delta, the transportation cost and the operation cost for the transfer station, for 65,000 tons a year, if you were to send all those materials to Hillsborough County, those costs would be about $5.5 million a year. So that would help you when you're looking at your capital investment of $26.7 million versus 7, your costs difference for processing and the other things that I outlined, it's about $5.5 million a year to send your materials to Hillsborough County, in addition to what you see there with the tonnage.
Mr. Ackers? Yep.
Yeah, so that cost that you're just talking about, which I think about as that processing, getting it over there, you don't have that in the $105 or the $128 a ton
No, sir. That's just for the processing going through the facility.
processing. So you're choosing to put that into the capital side of this equation.
Well, I just want to be clear. The capital is to construct either the MRF itself or the transfer station. The costs that aren't captured up there, and that's probably my fault, is the transportation cost to get the material to Hillsborough, that delta T between the 128 and 105, and then your actual operations of the transfer station itself. That wasn't captured in that Hillsborough MRF number. And that's about $5.5 million.
$5.5 million, how does that work out per ton? I mean, I'm just trying to add it on to the 128, so you get a sense.
Well, it would be that, it would vary. The transportation is about $30 a ton. Your operation at the transfer station is probably $15 to $20 a ton. And then your delta right there, you can see is $13 or $23 per ton.
So you're about $70 a ton.
Right. So when you look at that, if you look at a return on investment, 26.7 million for capital versus 7, and then you have, if you consider apples and apples on the processing side, it'd be $5.5 million more operating if you were to send your materials to Hillsborough. Now,
It seems like you'd recapture that capital cost pretty quickly.
correct.
I mean, just looking at the difference in the operating cost side.
Well, it would, that difference would be made up quicker.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it would be best if it would stay in Pinellas because you wouldn't be spending,
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Okay.
In a different way, sorry.
that's all right. Just make sure we're on the same sheet of music. So when we first presented this to the commission, the direction was, well, we'll keep it in Pinellas. So we looked at that, and then we went to the city managers, and they said, well, let's look at a countywide processing contract. So we spent time developing an RFP, going out on the street with that. And St. Pete wasn't really in, but they said, go ahead and look. So we did that, and we didn't get any responses to that RFP because we couldn't guarantee tonnage, either from the municipalities or for the unincorporated areas. So we met with the processors, we developed a second RFP, and we were about to go out on the street again, and they said, listen, Hillsborough is talking about building one of these. They're ahead of you. Nobody is going to bid on your contract until that's probably built, and then maybe we would look at Pinellas at that time. So we didn't even go out on the street with the second one because we met with all the processors, and they said, we're not going to do that. Only one processor said they were interested, and they don't even have one constructed yet. So we just put the brakes on. But knowing what we know with the costs, and I'm getting ahead of myself, when we look at the staff recommendation, our recommendation is just to cease moving forward at this time, looking at constructing a MRF or going to a countywide contract for the reasons that, one, St. Pete has said they're not in. That's a third of your recycled materials.
Why?
Because they have a sweet deal with Waste Connections, which is a processor in the city of St. Petersburg. So if it was anybody else but Waste Connections, they said they're not going to be in. So they wouldn't be in a countywide contract. Now you're down to a third. So
Really, it works for them, and they have a long-standing relationship there, and
they
that's,
wouldn't have to travel that far. It's in their city. They don't want to bring their recycled material somewhere else,
All the way up to mid-county.
wherever we said that, yeah.
Wow, that's a long way sometimes.
but it's right there for them, and that's.
I hear you.
It's,
I know, what's always good for the goose is good for the gander. I mean, it can't be always just about St. Petersburg. So I'm just thinking through these trade-offs on different issues that we have. And to me, this is a big one. So if we're not moving forward with something like this because they've chosen to go a different direction or stay with their direction, or however is best said, I think that's big. And we have 23 other cities that make up a third.
but you also have the processors right now, and so I think time may change that. You know, we may,
Yeah.
even from when we began to look at this a few years ago, a lot has changed. And so, you know, we could, so the ceasing doesn't mean that you're not going there. It's just, we're taking a pause while they focus on Hillsborough County for now.
That's correct. That's my thunder. And then the last piece of that is Solid Waste is going to be reviewing their master plan that was developed in 2020. It's been 5 years. We're going to be looking at that in 2025, and we're going to look at alternatives to what's being said here. Don't know what that would look like, but as Barry said, things changed. I mean, you know, when we first looked at this, the cost went from, you know, probably $70 or $80 to well over $100 in 2019. And they really haven't gone up much more. I mean, things have kind of stabilized. So everybody's kind of got their breath. They realize they kind of have their cadence of what's going on. Given the fact that the unincorporated areas, they're doing the recycling at 70%. If we had a guaranteed tonnage, we would have to go in there and mandate recycling in the unincorporated area. You know, we discussed that, and to do that when you're already doing it at 70% voluntary, you're going to just create havoc for everybody involved, telling them that they're going to have to spend more money to make that happen. So we just kind of said, let's just pump the brakes and wait to see where this goes.
And commissioners, on that particular piece, I mean, you're going to need that if you're going to guarantee tonnage. There's going to be a lot of effort and pain, I'm sure, with calls to you and then to me, you know, if we went down something like that. But you're not talking about franchising. You know, that's completely different. You're talking about what most people are doing now anyway. And so they would bake that into the cost of your contract. So whether it's with a homeowners association or individually, they would just bake that cost of recycling in because it's currently offered. And so it would be painful to get through. Let's wait and see. But I only highlight it because I think long-term it's something we're going to have to address, but not today.
And you're saying the technical committee and the city managers, by and large, are supportive of the pausing
Yes.
at this point?
Met with both TMC and the city managers
Is that
late
pretty-
July and August, and they both are.
Is that pretty much because of the St. Pete decision, or that and other things?
Hillsborough.
I think it's everything that's on there, as well as waiting to see what happens with Hillsborough and the processors around that.
We were hopeful that we'd get a response out of the private I mean, we've set it up to be private, let it continue to be private. We were hopeful for that response. When he come back and said, this is the response, it's like, wow, okay, well then let the private sector catch up on where they're at.
Certainly seems like the Hillsborough County alternative is too expensive. I mean, it's much better to do it here.
Well, it is, But it may be that one of the processors that are here in Pinellas, they may expand and be servicing Hillsborough because they were doing that before. Waste Connections was taking Hillsborough County's processing in St. Pete. So it could land in Pinellas County, and that may not be a bad thing for us. But we won't know until we kind of see how that unfolds.
Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. Paul, I'm a big proponent of recycling. I think you probably know that from conversations we've had. And it concerns me greatly that we are pausing at this moment. And this whole subject matter, I'm very curious because I don't serve on the Regional Planning Council board anymore, and I had hoped that Commissioner Flowers might be here because I wanted someone else to learn what their mission and focus was. But, you know, this is a issue that, to me, requires a bit of education, and the fact that we've moved so far over the last 5 years on sustainability and recycling issues, it seems to me that that's a perfect opportunity to build a coalition to address this issue from a larger regional perspective. And I find it very rich that we are pausing to wait and see what Hillsborough County is doing when they only have 3 cities and we have 24. That seems a little like the tail wagging the dog to me. I mean, they don't have the same, what's the word I'm searching for? They don't have the same motivation that we should have here. And last time I checked, don't we have a larger density issue in Pinellas County than they do over in Hillsborough? So of course we have more, I would think.
I just want to be sure when we say pause, all we're saying is we're not looking at moving forward to build a county-owned MRF or enter into a county-wide contract. All the municipalities are already recycling. They're going to continue to recycle. They're just going to use the existing contracts they have with the private MRFs that are out there. And Hillsborough is looking to maybe build their own MRF, which would service all of Hillsborough. I'm assuming the city of Tampa is along with that, because they have their own solid waste items going on as well. And it will be built for a one-shift operation. If they were to take, our operation, then they would, run a second shift. So wherever that processor is that responds, and whether they build new or they expand one that's, existing, I think we may have an opportunity then to see how that would best suit us. If it doesn't, then like I said, we'd be revisiting our master plan and looking for different alternatives, or we can go back and discuss whether we want to build our own or maybe enter into a countywide contract at that point. So all we're doing is just pausing the decision-making, but we're not pausing the collection of recyclables or the processing of recyclables. That's going to continue as it is today.
So on that note, given your recommendations here, is there any possibility to get an additional one of those dumpsters that you put anything in? Because the one that we go to in the Seminole Big County Park, I mean, that thing is so full all the time. People are just stacking stuff up around the dumpsters because you can't get it inside.
We will look at that at Seminole Lake Park?
Yeah,
Okay, I will
Yeah.
look at that. I know there's times over a weekend, sometimes it gets overwhelmed.
all week long. I
We will
mean,
look at that.
we've tried every day of the week, and it's just constantly full, to the point where you can't stuff anything else in there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Paul, is there a time frame that you have or think that there might be for Hillsborough to sort of figure out, or how all this shakes out? I mean, you think this is a 1-year, 2-year, 5-year process until we have some better direction?
I have not spoken with Hillsborough since probably the spring. The same with the processors. They said they were getting that ready to go out on the street in the summer. I have not seen that is out on the street, but I haven't really looked for it either. I'd have to look at that and provide you an update on that, which I'd be happy to do.
you
I
could do that,
know whoever would win that, whether they would expand or build new, I mean, you're probably looking at a 2 to 3 year period before, that was put in place, which would be the same, for us.
Right.
But I'll get an update for you on that, sir.
I appreciate it. And on to the market value of the recyclable materials, when you say that $60 a ton, is that plastic, is that paper, is that just an average?
It's a blend. It's a blend over all the recycled material markets,
And that includes metals and,
everything,
So do we have-
cardboard.
okay. Do we have the technology now to capture some of those rare earths? I know that you were talking about doing that at one point. Is that,
So the ferrous and non-ferrous metals, that project is actually at our waste energy facility.
Okay.
That it's separate from what's being collected at single-family residential curbside. And we're continuing on that after we get through the procurement of our new operator, which I'll discuss in a few minutes.
okay, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So really quickly, the solid waste ordinance, chapter 106, again, we're looking to revise that. No one's asked us to do this. It's just a very old ordinance that just needs to be revised based on where we're at with our master plan, both current state and where we're looking to go in the future. We've spent a lot of time on this. It's been a very interesting process. I know the staff has really enjoyed working on this. But again, it's really looking at our vision. We're looking to adjust the layout based on the 4 Rs that you would see from the EPA with reduce, reuse, recycle, recover. Lessons learned that we've gone out and researched other municipalities throughout the U.S. and Canada, focusing on waste reduction and then also removing any kind of duplicative information that's in there. And where we're at right now is we know that the recommended revisions that would be coming forth to you at this point would be private hauler licensing requirements. So any hauler that wants to provide collection in the unincorporated areas need to come to solid waste. We have requirements that they need to meet to be certified and licensed to go ahead and do that. It's old. It needs to be updated. There's just some accountability issues. There's reporting issues. There's things that we need now with the type of reporting that's necessary, not just for solid waste in Pinellas County, but things that need to be reported up to the state. So we just need to tighten that up. We also need to look at clarifying some of the TMC responsibilities that are in there. When we look at alternates, how they're being nominated, the responsibilities when they review the annual rate reviews and how that's recommended and brought up to Barry and the board for consideration. So we're revisiting that. Originally, we looked at, again, looking at mandatory recycling in the unincorporated area. We've just discussed that. We know that that's something that we would back off, during this revision. And there was also something in the master plan for us to look at food waste collection and processing. But to do that, we would need separation at the point of where it's being produced. So we did a statistically valid survey earlier in the year, and we looked at over 6,000 food waste generators in the county. 66% of them said not interested. And that could be for a host of different reasons, but usually that ends up being more cost to them and really space on where we could provide these containers, throughout the county. We've talked to the municipalities about this as well. Is this something that they'd be interested in? And they're kind of in and out. And I think there's not going to be any silver bullet with this. I think if we ever did get down that road, it would be something that we would have to pilot and look at certain types of industries that may be beneficial for us to grab. But right now, it doesn't look like anything that we would put in our ordinance revision that would come to you at this time. Those food waste generators, I think there's 10 or 15%, they actually take their waste food and divert it, and they have waste programs that the food is brought to others, which is commendable, whether, they're restaurants and hoteliers and things of that nature. And I think we can do more and help them for those that are not currently participating, but let others know that those programs exist, and it would kind of help us get there, organically. I guess no pun intended, but reducing that waste as we see it on the organic side, organic waste side. So next steps, we'll be incorporating what we have and bringing that for board direction. After we receive some of that direction from you, we'd go back and engage the staff. We have legal review and final draft, and then I think it would come back to you for final consideration, probably in the February, March timeframe. And we would see where that would go. But we want to make sure we got all the stakeholder engagement done at, long before that happens. And we've had some of that up to this point, so we'll continue to do that. So questions on the ordinance revisions that are being proposed? Okay. So next up, I want to talk about the waste energy facility operator procurement. So, as previously communicated to you all, Covanta, which has now been rebranded as Reworld, we've been working with them for almost 2 years trying to renegotiate their contract, which is set to expire at the end of 2024. We just couldn't get there. They provided us a cost for processing the waste through the facility, which was really a 50% increase. Right now, they're at about $25, and they wanted $38 to increase that processing in a revised extension going forward. Yet they wouldn't provide us the backup on why they needed 50% increase. I asked for a third-party review. I told them it didn't have to be us. You can keep the curtain closed. I just need somebody coming back that justifies what that increase was, and they wouldn't do that. So we discussed it with county administrator, and he says, what would we do if we were to put this out on the street? We went out and we looked. We know that there are operators out there that would be interested in a procurement, very interested in a procurement. So the decision was made that we would go out on the street to make that happen. This is a giant procurement, though. We're so late into the game, I cannot get a procurement done and in place before the existing agreement expires. So we've worked with Reworld to put an extension in place for 1 year. It'd be 6 months with two 30-day or two 90-day extensions to allow us to get through that period. So you're going to see an extension come to you in probably the October timeframe, and that, again, will move us forward. It will be at that $38 rate because they said that they wouldn't extend, but we need to do that for that 1 year to make that happen. In that extension would be the formal name change from Covanta to Reworld. They're asking that they can bring some of their regional headquarters staff and site them at the facility, which we've agreed to do at a least cost to them to make that happen. And then there's also transitional requirements that weren't in the original contract that would be included in the extension. So whoever the new provider is, if it's not Reworld, that they would have to provide those transition criteria for the new provider that's coming in. The procurement itself is going to be a two-phase procurement. We've talked with purchasing, given the size and the duration that this would need to be. Purchasing also recommended this two-phase process where first phase would be an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. We'll send that out to those that we know that are interested, but those that we know that do this type of work both domestically and internationally. Those submittals would be reviewed, and those that are shortlisted would then be invited to participate in the second phase, which would be the RFP process. And it would only be for those firms that are shortlisted. And then both sides would do their due diligence. We would meet with each of those firms that are willing to put a submittal together and propose. We would look and evaluate for that best firm, continue the negotiations, and then we would bring that recommendation back to the board. So you can see the schedule there. We're ready to go out on the street. The RFQ documents are in place. They're actually in OpenGov, so I would expect that this to be released sometime later this month or in October. Phase 2, after we do our evaluations, would be in the first 6 months of 2025. Take some time to get a new contract award, some mobilization, and then we're hoping for a 3-month transition with a new operator and Reworld for the last 3 months of 2025, and then the new operator would be standing on their own at the beginning of 2026. So we think that's a comfortable time frame. All the documents are, well, the RFP document is about 90% complete, so I feel like we're going to be in a very good place to meet, the schedule that's in place. And like I said, we know we have at least 2 other firms other than Reworld that's interested in operating the Pinellas facility.
Paul, how many companies are out there that do this type of work?
I would say there's probably a dozen that do waste-to-energy operation.
Okay.
But I would say there's less than 5 that actually do it on the scale of the Pinellas plant. Pinellas is one of the largest facilities in the U.S. because based on size and being what's called a qualified facility in the eyes of the federal government, 80 megawatts is the maximum, and we're operating at 75. There's very few other facilities that come close to that. I think Palm Beach has 2 facilities that probably are in that same, generation criteria.
Thanks. One question, Mr. Maggard.
So a year contract's not going to buy us any less rate if we just did a year with them?
No.
It's a shame that we're kind of backed up like this, and
We're a little bit over a barrel with this. I mean, that's, I wouldn't expect that their number coming in when they do a proposal would be less than that. That's their number. That's what they say it costs them to operate here. We don't see that. We just were asking to be shown why that is, and they're not going to show us. I mean, it's proprietary to them. So, but we need somebody to operate that facility. So for 1 year, we would have to do that. I don't like it. I'm sure you don't like it, but that's where we're at. We really tried to bring this in under a renegotiation, Commissioner. We just could not get there.
You're going to see an increase, but the reality is there's no way to justify bringing something to you without documentation, verification.
This thing to market.
That type of cost without a formal RFP process. So that's kind of how we backed into, we have to go through this process or you're not going to accept it. I mean,
So we do know, based on our rate studies, different scenarios, if costs come in, we'll know almost immediately what the impact would be to our tipping fee. So, I mean, we've already done that homework. But we believe the number coming in would be less than the 38 for a qualified number. I don't know what exactly that is. I have a number, but I'm not going to share it because that wouldn't be good here.
how's that going to affect any of our rates?
It will.
The next year?
We know that the rates will go up. I mean, right now, we're paying $25 a ton. It would go up again in October, per CPI, so the number would go up a little bit more, but it would not be the $38 a ton that Covanta or ReWorld's proposing. So even at that $38 number, if we went up and that was the best number that came back, and that's where we're at, that would be probably a 1 to 1.5% increase above the increases that we've been asking. So if we've been on a trajectory of maybe 6.5% year over year, it would push it more to about 8% year over year. Now, again, our tipping fees are relatively low when you're looking at what's happened in the industry because they didn't start getting raised until 2019. So we're still, from an industry standpoint, what that is. And we can also come back and tell you what that 6.5 or 8% means to, the homeowner that's out there and what the disposal fees would.
I mean, I'd love to be able to help be a shock absorber this year somehow and then see where the RFPs are taking us.
Yeah, we're not adding in that $38 to this year's increase. We're going to hold firm because we have the reserves to do that. Until we have a number and come back, then we would be baking
Where
that.
that was going to be my next question, so thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay. And then last up is power brokering. So, we had Duke here before. Our power purchase agreement expires with them at the end of 2024. We spent years trying to renegotiate that, and it just couldn't happen. And it's nothing against Duke. They have things that they can and can't do in the eyes of the federal government, in the eyes of the Utilities Commission. So they have what now is a standard offer contract that if we wanted to enter into, it's just substantially less than what we've gotten in the past 30 years ago. The one that we've received 30 years ago was very county generous. It has put us in a very good position, as we move forward. The new one would be a reduction of about 55% of our revenue with electrical power sale and the capacity payments that we would receive as to date. those numbers get very, very small. So we're looking at options. And, you know, the options that we have is testing the energy market, which is the line that's in green. You have Duke Energy, which is the line that's kind of like dark blue or purple, I guess. You have Florida Power and Light, which is the light blue, and you have TECO Energy. So with Duke, we would just be entering, an option would be entering into a standard option contract. If we entered in with Florida Power and Light or TECO, which are the nearest surrounding utilities, we would have to enter into an agreement with them and pay Duke a wheeling fee to get our power through their territory, in and out, you know, to either Florida Power and Light and TECO. The energy market, we would have to pay a wheeling fee, but we get higher fees based on the forecast that we've seen through our third-party forecasters that are out there every day doing this. And again, we're not the only ones that would be doing this. Lee County's been doing this for a decade. Miami-Dade was doing it before their plant burnt down. So we know we have good people that can do this. So we're looking for a portfolio of things. But we know the existing market, based on what we see with the forecast, at least through 2028, is the best option for us to receive payments for our energy, which would offset what we would receive from Duke in a standard offer contract. We will review this every year. The forecasts change every year. Most of the forecasts are based on the cost of natural gas, which are really at an all-time low. Every dollar per therm that natural gas goes up results in about a $5 per megawatt increase for us on a generation sale. That's kind of the ratio that we see in that area. So unless natural gas significantly changes, you know, we're not going to see much change with what's there in the forecast. And given the investment that's being made in solar, I'm not so sure how much natural gas is going to change. I mean, if I knew all that, I wouldn't be working here. But that's the best that I could tell you that the energy providers, you know, have for us right now. So that's the course that we're going to be recommending to you when we bring a power brokering contract to you forward.
So more investment in natural gas would drive the prices down and help us. Is that what you're saying? Is that?
Well, I don't know about.
You just
I would say more demand for natural gas in any kind of form of investment that would drive natural gas up is beneficial for us.
Oh, that drives it up. Okay, I was looking.
Yeah, when natural gas goes up, it's better for us.
Better for us on the market.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So when I talk to you about a portfolio option, right now we put about 65, 70 megawatts we generate. About 62, 65 go out onto the grid. We need to use some of the power that's generated to operate the building itself. That's called a parasitic load. So some of that's, not all that goes out onto the grid. So of the power that's going out onto the grid, we were approached, which was great for us, by a group that's representing utilities in southern Georgia. And they want 40 megawatts of what we generate out of that 60 or 65. They want it on a term for 5 years. And they're looking at something that's north of $42 net, which means we're not even paying for the transmission of power from us through Duke Energy to get to Georgia. And when you go back and look at the other numbers that were out there on the previous chart, the best that we get is probably 25 to 30. This is north of 40. And Georgia has a severe power need. They're looking at 1,200 megawatts year over year in increased demand. So that almost be like building a power plant every year for the next 5 years, which they can't do. They got to buy power from somewhere else. And here we are, we're lucky to be in a position that we need to sell our power. So we're working with them right now. They're working with Duke to line up that transmission fee and also the capacity that needs to make sure that power can flow for that 5 years. And we expect that agreement to come back to us probably in the late October, November timeframe. So that would lock in 40 of your 60 or 65 megawatts at a rate that's higher than anything else that's out there. It's above the green curve that you saw on the last form. So that would be a great option for us to have. All we need to do is maintain 90% of the capacity factor that's required. For that 40 megawatts, we have 3 units. So if we have 2 units running, we can meet that. And if we don't meet that, then we just get a little bit of reduction on a prorated basis for what's not being delivered because they have to buy it somewhere else. So there's very low risk associated with this based on that 40. I wouldn't recommend going more than that because I don't believe we can meet that 90% capacity that they need. So as we receive this, again, we would bring this back to you. I think it's a sweetheart deal. I'd say we ride that wave as long as we can, and I think we're very, opportunistic and even having that as an opportunity for moving forward.
Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that would still leave us with 20. Would we be able to sell that to Duke at the lower rate?
Good segue. Next slide. So that would be where we're talking about brokering our power on the open market. So that's
Okay.
the green.
All right. So that's
green
separate.
curve. So we'll have a third party that's all they do. By hour, they'll be marketing your 20 or 25 megawatts to Seminole, Jacksonville, Orlando utilities. It could be at Homestead. It could be another one of the utilities that may have a unit that's down. And we will do our best to sell at that green line rate. It changes every hour. It changes from day to night. So whatever isn't sold, we would dump the Duke. They have to take what we give them on an as available rate. We don't get good money for it, but we would rather make a lot of money or more money on the balance as much as we can and dump what little we can over here on the side to Duke. So that's kind of that framework.
That's where I was a little confused on the Constellation. I thought I didn't realize that was their utility up there that we're selling to, the Constellation Energy Company. Because I was thinking, we talk about all the time, how many homes does 40,000, 45,000 homes that are powered by this through Duke locally? So they've got to make up that power somewhere as well.
Yes. And this power brokering agreement, when we enter in, we would be able to piggyback on what Lee County has. So purchasing says it's a good contract. Again, we would bring this to you probably in the October timeframe. It's in OpenGov going through review. The power broker only makes money when they make money for us. So if we know we are going to sell to Duke at 2 cents a kilowatt, they're only going to make money for everything that they sell north of that and 10% of whatever, they make. So if they sold it for 3, they would get 10% of that 1 penny per kilowatt that they would make. And they're going to be motivated to do that. And again, that's a vehicle and a process that we know that works, that everybody is satisfied in the amount of money that's out there to make.
Paul, would Constellation take north of 40 if we wanted to sell it to them?
No, not on an as available. We would have to enter into something that would be firm. And again,
They want to know that it's consistent, they can rely on it.
exactly, they're willing to pay a higher dollar for a firm commitment.
Okay.
Because in Georgia, where there's a lot of demand and not a lot of supply, they may be having to pay more on a short-term interval for that power, but they're not going to want to do that from us because we wouldn't be able to guarantee that to them. And I fully understand that, and that would be, with this portfolio approach, and you don't have all your eggs in that one basket.
Right.
So,
So the excess power, basically, the brokers are going to be selling it on the spot market?
yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks.
So that's the updates that I have for you today. I never thought I'd be in this role of being an energy portfolio manager, but it's amazing the opportunities that Pinellas County affords you over your career. So, but I'm looking forward to it. It's very interesting.
Any update on the efforts over in Hillsborough County from the gentleman that they're pushing that carbon recapture concept? Anything going on over there in Hillsborough? Any updates that you can share?
I have not
know
heard.
we weren't going to go down that path yet, but just wondering if you had any updates.
Well, I left it with them that when they got their pilot program going, if they got their pilot program going, to call us, we would come over and look at that. I have not heard anything more from that group since then.
Probably still early for that, but okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Paul, one other quick thing. I don't know, a week or so ago, Commissioner Flowers had sent out a video to all of us. I don't know if it made it to you or not, about, I forget what country it was. they have like 4 waste energy plants, and then they take all of their plastic recyclables and they turn it into road paving materials. I was just wondering if you had seen that and just what your thoughts were on that.
I haven't seen that video, but I haven't seen it for plastics. We've seen it for ash. So the ash that would come out of the back end.
Maybe it was the
waste
ash from the
energy.
plastics, it could have been.
You know, you still have a lot of glass and things of that nature. It's a very abrasive substance, but it is, you know, combined with that's the bottom ash. I mean, if you were to grill and you have your ash at the bottom, that's your bottom ash. The problem that we have on our site is we have the top ash, which comes off and goes through your emissions that gets captured. That's the hazardous materials of what's being captured and not put out the stack. That needs to stay on our site. And the only place that we have right now is to combine that with the bottom ash, and then that gets put in our landfill. And FDEP is good with that. It's kind of the industry standard. So on site, we use that ash everywhere. But until the FDEP or the regulatory bodies would allow that ash composition to leave the site and be used for road base, we really wouldn't be able to use, you know, that ash for that process. But our master plan has identified that ash can be used almost to create like a cinder block. And in the long term, what we're looking at is when the landfill moves across the street to what we call the sod farm area, and we start to create new landfill over there, those blocks would be used to create more of a vertical wall as opposed to the slope wall that you see on our existing landfill. And when you build them straighter, that's going to create more airspace as opposed to what you would lose, you know, in that triangle piece when you're doing that. So we do have a plan for our ash. Plus the ash that we have probably wouldn't be enough to assist Kelly when she's trying to build, you know, a longer road or whatnot. It would only be a portion thereof, and I'm not sure how that would mix with other road-based materials or whatnot. But we do have a plan to reuse that, so.
Got it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything more?
Anything else? All right, thank you, Paul.
All right, thank you for the opportunity.
All right, so now we'll move on to public communication and county projects.
Barbara's on her way up, and this is really an update. They've really worked really hard on, you know, you've seen us try to work with our departments on ways to better engage the public on projects. And so they've kind of formalized that, and so she's going to kind of outline our thoughts and guidelines that we're trying to incorporate, you know, within our projects.
Good morning, Commissioners. Barbara Hernandez, Communications Director. I'm very excited today to be presenting on the guidelines for, and I'm going to tell you just a very brief story about collaboration and consistency that we have seen play out across all of our county departments over the past year. I'm going to walk you through that journey real quickly, and then I'll tell you more about what this means for us. So some time ago, we figured out that we were all in our respective departments doing our best to reach out to residents, to inform them about county projects, new county initiatives, and trying to do engagement at the right time, depending on the life of that project. But we did find out that we weren't fully consistent and that there were opportunities to enhance our processes and work collaboratively a little better. And there was a lot of energy. Departments assigned staff to join that working group. They provided a lot of expertise. They told us what they were doing. We shared our best practices. And we met with project managers, so people who are actually going out, talking to the residents about those projects that are happening. We learned a lot. And in that process, we also looked at what some of our peer communities were doing, and we took some lessons from the International Association for Public Participation. That is the standard for best practices when you engage residents. And so we drafted our own guidelines, and we created some worksheets for our project managers. And we said, is this something that works for all of us to use moving forward? We've been testing them, and we've gotten to a point where we feel really good about the work we've done and how we can use those guidelines and those worksheets moving forward. So we wanted to share that with you at this work session ahead of finalizing those guidelines and worksheets and beginning to train and implement across all of the departments with all of the project managers. So what did our working group do? As I said, we met, we had a lot of internal meetings, and I want to recognize all of the team members of that group. They were dedicated, they showed up, they gave ideas, they were contributing all the time. We looked at what we were already doing. We talked to public works project managers, we talked to utilities project managers, all across the board. And we learned about their practices. And then together we put a consistent approach for moving forward. We created guiding principles, basically saying we're going to prioritize public engagement when we're looking at our projects, and we're going to do it earlier on in the process when we're still thinking about what might this mean for a community and who could be affected. We defined levels of engagement, and then we developed a 5-step process and a toolkit. So when I talk about levels of engagement, what does that mean? We know that not every project we do at the county is going to require a public meeting. It's not going to require a lot of public participation. Some projects, some activities just have to get done. We have to patch a pothole. We have to repair a fence. So we don't want to get in the way of that. But when we have projects that are bigger in scope or that could potentially become controversial due to what they're trying to accomplish, we want to make sure that we find the right spot, the sweet spot for engagement. So some projects will require us to just inform the community. This is happening, here's what you can expect, here's when it's going to happen. Other projects may require us to go out and talk to those residents and get their input, get their ideas, get their feedback, or even their suggestions on how to make the project even better. And so we go from informing to empowering our residents through the process. How do we figure out what that spectrum of engagement is? So the first thing we do is we define the project. We have a lot more meetings these days. Our staff in communications, we have a monthly check-in with Public Works and project managers, so we go through dozens and dozens of CIP and county projects. We define what the project is. What is this project looking to accomplish? How might it be perceived by our neighbors, by the residents in that area? What kind of impacts do we think it's going to have? Does it affect trees? Does it affect sidewalks? Does it affect the flow of traffic? And then we identify who all needs to know about this project, including those residents who are harder to reach because of maybe where they live or maybe language barriers or whatever the reason might be. We're also going to be thinking about them. Once we figure those two things, then we go back to that spectrum of engagement that I shared earlier, and we say, okay, based on what we know about the project and the people that we need to reach, is this a public meeting? Is this just informing them? Do we need to get some input? How do we do that? So then we create a plan. Do we have to create surveys? Do we have to hold meetings one-on-one because it's a smaller project? Is this a series of interactions? Do we need to do charrettes? The scope of activities is very broad. We implement our plan, and then lastly, but very importantly, we go back to those residents and those stakeholders. We thank them for their input, and we tell them either how it helped shape the project or how the project looks like now, and help them understand our thought process in finalizing the plans for that project. And this is just a very high-level example of some of the toolkits that the toolkit worksheets that we have put together. Our project managers have started testing them. We've actually done a few projects, and they so far have been working really well for us. Our meetings have just, they're way enhanced. We start talking about impacts and who do we need to talk to a lot earlier in the process. So we're already getting there in terms of that collaboration and that consistency. And so we wanted to make sure and share that with you and tell that really positive story that our departments are increasing that collaboration and making sure that we increase that transparency for our residents. I do want to very quickly recognize Erica Owen McCann. She's our Public Participation and Engagement Coordinator who's behind the working group and a lot of these efforts, and she has really led a very great team effort. I know most of you have already met her and talked with her, but I did want to recognize her. And I'll take any questions you have.
Thoughts, questions? Commissioner Justice.
Thank you. When you get out and you're, one, I think this is great, you know, because I think there have been projects where I think staff needs that checklist, you know, to go through the process. So I think this is a great idea process-wise. When you get out there and there's a project and you're talking to the public and you're and there are, by engineering or whatever, there are 2 or 3 alternatives and you don't get consensus. You have, you know, how do you work through that communication to the folks who think this county made the absolute wrong decision in the direction they're going on the engineer's recommendations or whatever?
So one of the really cool things about establishing guiding principles is that as departments, as staff, as project managers, we agree that we're going to prioritize those relationships with the residents. And what that means is that when we go out to talk to them, we manage expectations very early. We say, this is what we're looking at doing. This is the scope of it. And these are the areas where we can talk about options and opportunities. And these are the project details that are set, and here's why they're set. Here's why we cannot change X factor about this project. And the more we do that, the more we set and manage those expectations with the residents up front, the more they're going to trust us when we go back to them and we share updates that may or may not agree with what they would like to see. We know that having a public engagement process, we know that the worksheets and the guidelines, they're not going to be a magic wand to solve controversy on projects. But we know that they can help us get closer to better relationship management with the residents over time.
Yeah, we've just had a couple over the years where, it wasn't necessarily we have to do it this way. There was a choice. It was a objective, subjective choice. I remember one specifically where it was I think a 4-3. It came to the commission, it got to that level and it was a 4-3, and it was a subjective. Anyway, I know we can't always, but that's when you have the engagement, when it's not just done and they show up one day doing the work, that you engage the public. That's always the, I don't want to say risk, but that is the risk that you have of getting folks engaged and wanting to make the decision. And when the decision goes the other way, you have to be able to want to continue them in the engagement so that they feel like they're still part of the process.
Yeah, and those are some of the questions we are factoring into the worksheets intentionally. What are the things that can be influenced and what are the things that cannot? And we ask ourselves those questions before we go out to the residents, because we know that if we do it in-house, if we sort through those, is it really a negotiable or is it not? We're going to be in a better place when we talk to the residents and when we talk to media about projects, because a lot of these projects do end up in the media eye. So we want to make sure that we have those conversations in-house and manage those expectations early on with the residents.
Any other questions? Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I really appreciate we have, I don't know how many directors we have with, different departments, and not all of them are project-driven. And do we have some folks, I remember there was a move to embed some folks in the departments. Yes. Are those your points of contact on the projects for your department?
Yep, and we've really made that structure a lot more robust. So my public information staff now they have different departments that they collaborate with, and so they have in-office days, so to speak, with the different departments. We also have monthly meetings, and Erica and I have meetings with the assistants to the county administrator, so Amy, Nancy, and these are even outside of a project is coming up. This is to make sure that we have a lot more collaboration in-house, and that as conversations are happening in the departments, we're picking up on those and asking some questions, and internally we have that conversation. And I really have to say it's been working really well, and the level of trust internally, the level of collaboration is just at an all-time high.
I think that's awesome, and immediately I'm thinking about this bridge on Ridgemore Boulevard.
It's on our list.
I'm already, and so having communication up front throughout the process, and having ways for folks to plug in and call in and everything. Interesting part that you talked about, closing the loop at the end, which is kind of interesting. I kind of like the idea. You come in and you tell people we're going to disrupt your world, and you disrupt, you don't, but the project disrupts their world, and to follow back through and say, thank you for your input, for your calls along the way, but for all the inconvenience. I mean, I think it's a nice way to loop back and let folks know that, I know it was an inconvenience to you. We're sorry about that. We did our best, kind of thing. I don't know. I think that's.
I mean, they're trying to make sure that the public engagement is as much of the project as the engineering, right? Yeah. From the beginning to the end, and they have embedded their staff to where when the project managers are setting and talking about the difficulties of the project, they're there listening to that. They're not just asked to engage in communication at the end. That way they can effectively communicate because they understand the difficulties, which sometimes is the hard piece to communicate with residents. So, it's a great effort. It certainly enhances, I think, our projects, and I'm sure we'll have, refinement as we go along, but it's certainly a very good step.
Yeah, it's just getting the job done isn't enough, right? And I think our staff's just so good at that part, but it's how we do it. and try to minimize the pain as much as possible or inconvenience.
Yeah.
Anticipation, expectations, all of that kind of gets mixed in. So, well, good work. I like that so far.
Yeah, we're now looking at projects through different lenses, and I think that's really what's helped us enhance the process. And I do, again, want to recognize the amazing staff that we have, our project managers, the supporting staff. They've been very dedicated, very committed to it. We had a very high-profile project earlier this year, actually late last year, that we worked on. We had community meetings. It was very controversial. And I can't tell you how many internal meetings we had, and project managers. We even did dry runs on the PowerPoints. How is this going to come across? Is there a better way to say this? And everybody was just open to those ideas.
Think about it, we have, how many project managers do we have in the county? 150?
Close to 100,
You know?
yeah, 50.
I mean, that's a lot of people to try to get consistency in the way you communicate and, so.
Barbara, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, on to the agenda?
Yep.
All right. So we have some awards and presentations. You can see those in your packet. We'll go down through your various items. We'll go over to start with item number 14. This is declaring surplus equipment, Brown County-owned equipment. The assets are listed within your packet. Receipt and file items. Item number 16, is ranking of firms with Aetna Health for electronic health records. This is through our homeless health care program. So this is a replacement of that system. We're using ARPA funds to do that. It's part of our budgeted plan. It's a very large system, and it addresses, that's one of the legacy systems that we need to replace for all kinds of reasons, HIPAA and everything else. Item 17 is an award of bid to preferred materials for the 2025 pavement package number 2. I sent you out a note talking about the great job that they're doing and repaving lane miles of road, and so this adds to our portfolio. Item number 18 is a ranking of firms with HDR Engineering for signalization improvements at various locations. They've listed the target areas within your packet, $1.3 million. Onto the regular agenda, item 20 is demolition of a fire-damaged structure and vacant property. This was run through the special magistrate. Will lien the property after the demolition for recoupment of cost. Item 21 is a funding agreement with OHI West, this is Orlando Health Bayfront, for our Pinellas County Health Program. So this, we have it available. This is our blue card with 3 different hospital agreements, and you can see the percentages listed within your packet. Is that right? You smiled. I got nervous that I got it wrong. Okay. Got it. All right. So 2022 is an annual agreement with Sheriff's Office for environmental lands deputies. 23 is an amendment to the interlocal agreement with the Metropolitan Planning Organization that takes them from 13 to 19 members. Item 24s, as we covered last time with Amy, this is the Lellman Community Development Redevelopment Work Plan. And then 25 is the budget that covers the CRA.
Under item number 26, this is a request to initiate litigation against Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Florida. This is to recover damages related to ambulance transport. And I am not planning any reports at this time.
I will have a county administrator's report. Item 29 is appointments to the Transit Authority. That's a committee as a whole, and appointments to the Transit Authority by Commissioner Peters. A couple of public hearings. Item 32s, this is an amendment for the Lellman. You just did this for the solid waste collection, but we had incorrect totals. It shows the totals on the left, but they were left off from the original, so we just ask that you redo it as we make that correction. Oh, you are pulling this item? 30. I'm on 32. Okay. I just work here, guys. All right. So Yeah, 32 is a correction to an amendment. Nothing changes substantively, but we didn't list the details that we needed within the original ordinance or the item 33 we need to pull because this requires a economic impact statement, the new state law requirement, and we didn't do that, complete that in time. So we need to pull that and bring that back to you. And then item 34 is the final adoption of our 2025 budget. I did want to take the time, since we got everybody here, a couple of you got to introduce him meeting before, but Bill Greer is our new department head. So we put all of our construction, real estate, all under one roof, facilities. So we've combined those operations, separated those because we have so much focused around our vertical construction, and we need an emphasis on that. So Bill was coming in. He comes with a good background. I sent you out his resume. So we're excited to have him on board and see what he can accomplish there.
Welcome.
And that's all I have.
Just a couple questions. Justice. Thank you. Just on, going back on item 20, when we demolish, it's probably for Jewel, so we'll demolish it, we'll pay $19,000 to demolish it, and then that lien will be on the property, and according to the data here, we don't have any information on, I mean, next of kin doesn't want it, nobody wants it. I mean, is that, I don't know if you have the details on it, or?
I mean, I can certainly look into it. A lot of times when you
do you
have
have details
houses
on it?
like this, oftentimes there's issues with the chain of title. I don't know the specifics on this one, but.
Tom was just saying the owner passed away, and no
So
next
would
of
the-
kin. I mean, I'm sure you did search on.
And so how long would the lien roll up before we would take ownership of the property and then put it back into, any idea, ballpark, just what the process would be?
Well, I
defer to
mean,
legal.
a property gets liened, I mean, it'll sit there until something happens to it. This is one of the issues that we'll encounter with code enforcement frequently when there is a death and a probate's not open. This is oftentimes what leads to the deterioration of the property, is there's nobody left to manage it. Sometimes in cases like this, what we will see are the tax certificates go out and the property transfer that way. But once a lien is recorded, there's nothing that's going to take that forward unless we choose to foreclose on the property, which could be an option. Of course, then you're left with who would the defendant in that lawsuit be? So it's, it's challenging when you have issues like this. We can certainly look into the details of this particular one, though, and get some more info for you.
All right, thank you. And then the other, it's language, I guess, on the PSTA appointment, that is the chair's appointment ratified by the board, I guess, or the board's appointment. I forget PSTA, if that's a whole board appointment or a chair appointment ratified by the board. It's not Commissioner Peters as an individual commissioner. It was just language in there. It's just, I think, written wrong on the agenda. More for the public who's looking at it than us. That's Commissioner Scott's appointment on the PSTA. It's our representative, one of our representatives of the four we have. I think your term your term ended weird on the calendar,
It
so.
must have been, yeah. I was kind of surprised to see it there, actually.
Yeah, it just got written interestingly on the agenda, that's all. And the other one is our citizen appointment.
Yeah.
Right, that's all. It's just language. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else? No? Well,
That's all I got.
well then, I guess we're adjourned. Everybody have a nice weekend. We'll see you next week. Next Thursday.
Next
Thursday, that's right, next
You
Thursday.
know?
So.